Right, so thanks everybody for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're super excited to have Rob Hamilton here from Digits, which is a new AI GL that we think is different than some of the others. So Rob, I'm going to go on mute, but you and Michelle can take it from here.
Awesome. Well, hi everybody. As Denise mentioned, my name is Rob Hamilton. I run the go-to-market teams at Digits, which effectively just means I talk to accounting firms and finance professionals all day about how we can help bring efficiency to the accounting workflows. So very excited to chat with everyone today. I'm going to first dive in to just walk through a little bit about who we are, and then we can dive into the product itself and talk through some AI differentiation and all the above to help firms think about what AI actually means, where it's practical to apply, and all the above. So excited to dive in. Obviously, throughout this, I think the chat is on. So like we'd love this to be as interactive as possible. In webinars and things like that, I always love to just like, folks aren't participating, like let's make it uncomfortable and sit in silence until someone asks questions. So please, I would just let you know, like if you have a question, it's likely that other people have the same question. So please like put it out there and we can make sure we speak to those things and all the above. Should be, make it fun and interactive for everyone today. So with that, let me make sure I'm bringing up and sharing the right thing here. There we go. So we'll start here. Can someone just confirm that, that they can see my screen here?
Yep. Welcome to
Beautiful.
AI Native Accounting. It looks good.
Beautiful. So I'll first just do a quick refresher on Digits, is that we've actually been around for about 7 years to reimagine accounting in the machine learning era. It's been a long journey, but that's led us to build the world's first agentic general ledger. And we launched this ledger in March to operators and business owners. And then at Scaling New Heights, a couple months back, we launched to accounting firms with firm features on top, like a dashboard where you can manage all your clients, manage permissions of your team, all the above. And then just a couple weeks back, we launched our accounting partnership program that aligns, specific discounts, training support, our own certification program, and then a marketplace to showcase, like for your firm, just how like AI native are you in some senses. So, but throughout this whole time, we've been building and testing and using our ledger with accounting firms like Highline and Armanino. But also we built kind of like an R&D accounting firm inside of our product organization as well. And so across all these firms, thousands of month-end closes have actually been done with real businesses on top of Digits, bringing incredible efficiency gains. Where just after a couple months, we've seen firms gain or decrease their close times by over 30% for each of their clients. And so where did this come about? We were founded by Jeff Seibert, who was a prior head of product at Twitter and co-founder of Crashlytics. But then now our head of product strategy, some of you might know, is Craig Walker. He was the co-founder and longtime CTO of Xero. And we're also led on the GTM side by Bebe Kim, who was a CMO at LegalZoom, and a bunch of other pieces as well. So I talked about this a little bit, but it takes a long time to build a ledger, and it takes a long time to make it so the database architecture and structure of the company are able to take advantage of machine learning. It's not super possible to just say like pop up out of nowhere out of Y Combinator and be like, we're going to automate bookkeeping and accounting. It's like it takes a long time to set up these structures and actually train models to make sure that this all flows together in the right way. And so we talked through this, but we launched InHumanX on stage with the co-founder, with the CPO of OpenAI. And the way that we think about all of this is, if QuickBooks was pioneering desktop native accounting, and then Xero came in and it pioneered cloud native accounting, Digits really sees itself as pioneering AI native accounting. And how that ultimately looks is we actually, our head of machine learning and principal machine learning engineer actually wrote the O'Reilly books on machine learning pipelines. And there's a new one coming out fairly soon. So excited to, keep building out these mechanisms. But ultimately, what does AI native mean? And so in this world, what it means is you've actually built what's called a semantic knowledge graph. of a business. We can obviously go into any details as necessary as well, but this is a fundamental data architecture difference from legacy systems. So the way to think about like QuickBooks and Xero all the way up to NetSuite and Oracle is they're fundamentally relational databases. They were architected 20 to 30 years ago, and they treat each transaction basically as a row in a database, and they treat it as text. So let's say that your client took an Uber ride. QuickBooks just sees UBER. It just sees text. It sees whatever you type in, and you type in those transactions, and you probably notice they sort of sit there in the database. And then when you run a report, it prints that data back out to you, and of course aggregates it by accounts, etc. But it doesn't actually understand that data. It doesn't know what Uber is. Digits builds a semantic knowledge graph of every business. So rather than seeing each transaction as a random string of text, Digits natively understands your vendors, your customers, bank accounts, expense categories, etc. And through this, we can map the flow of money through each business, which allows the AI to build that semantic data model and understanding of the money flow, which is how we can get really accurate at booking transactions. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. We've also been able to build this in a very secure way. And again, I'll go into the details of this a little bit later, and Michelle and I will talk about this a bit as well. But the way that this works is we've trained these models proprietarily to Digits. We're not shipping the bank feed data and the chart of accounts all off to OpenAI and just regurgitating what OpenAI says back. And because of this, we've built models that are predictive, and so they never hallucinate. Accounting is predictive, it's not generative, and our model architecture eliminates any chance of hallucination. And anyone relying on GPT or just bolting it onto legacy systems can't actually say that. And we bring these technology pieces together as workflows and not just features. So when you do the work, we are learning as that work gets done instantly. So if a transaction comes in and you change the category, there's not a rule to be seen. You're not editing these things. You are not the machine learning. We are just learning based on your actions that you're taking in the product. And we're built to be agent operated 24 hours a day. And a great example of this is, and I'll show you how this works in the product, but a great example of this is that when a new vendor comes in to Digits, we've actually built agents that go out and do exactly what your junior staff might do. Is the agent will Google it, and we'll go gather all the information. We'll bring in the logo, all the details about that vendor. And that's going to work 24 hours a day as the bank feed comes in. And it's going to bring in a bunch of stuff that would just be utterly too time consuming for you to take as a accountant, like downloading a logo and uploading it into the ledger so it looks a little bit prettier when you share something with your business owner, but it has meaningful impact to the business owner's relationship with things. So how we think about this is you have to use QuickBooks, whereas you're just supervising Digits and double checking that work. And ultimately what we've built is the first end-to-end QuickBooks replacement in 20 years. And what that means in practice is you have all these things you go through in a month-end close. And today that ends up being like 15 different tools spread across a bunch of different clients, like all of the above. And that is challenging to navigate, especially when each client potentially uses different tools than your other client. And what this looks like within Digits is all of these pieces are pieces we are going to be working through to automate. And I'll show you some of that a little bit later today as well. But one thing I wanted to talk about specifically was around the booking transactions flow. And so this gets into some of what makes, AI native architecture unique for Digits, and how you could think of Digits as basically a layer cake. So you go connect your bank accounts and your credit cards and things like that. And we've built a layer cake of models that help classify these transactions. And the reason this can get so accurate is we actually train on the individual company level first. And so let's say you're bringing someone over from QuickBooks. We have a full API integration. So it pulls everything over in like roughly 10 minutes, depending on the size of the company. And that will then train the model on how the bookkeeping has historically been done within that business. And in that world, if a transaction comes in that we've seen before, it's effectively perfect at booking that transaction because we've seen it before. Now, if something novel comes in and it hasn't been seen within that company model, we actually have what's called a firm model, which as far as I know, we're the only company that even is able to do this from machine learning perspective. But what it will do is look across all your clients at the firm and say, have we seen a similar transaction to this before? And if you have, we will use that learning and book it on the company side. And this is what's great is like you can start to almost encode your firm's best practices into clients. And it works particularly well with net new clients who maybe you don't have a lot of, maybe they're starting fresh or you're trying to upload data that they sent you from a bank statement or whatever it may be. You can leverage then your firm model to book those transactions at a much higher accuracy rate from the beginning before you ever do any other work on top of their books. Now, if the firm, maybe there's like a new coffee shop down the street someone went to, no one's ever seen it, it'll go to the global model. And then we'll see if anyone has seen a similar transaction across all the transactions and digits. And then worst case scenario, which is typically only happening on a very low percentage of transactions, is we'll do what's called a zero shot fallback to an LLM, which is we'll build like a dossier about a transaction. So we'll go do Googling, like, have we seen this vendor before? All this kind of stuff, and give that to an LLM and basically say, like, do you have any idea what this might be? We can kind of like highlight, this is what we think it might be. And then it'll give us some guidance and we'll book based on that. Now, if everything falls through all of this, AI like has confidence thresholds of whether or not we know what something is or not. So if you fall through this layer cake, we're like, well, we actually have no idea what this is. What happens is it then books that, or it sends that into your inbox to review as an accountant and say, like, okay, I either have expertise that I know what this is, or great, I don't know what this is. I need context from the business owner. I'm going to send over a question to that client. And again, I'll show you what this flow looks like. But what this ultimately looks like in practice is Digits is in the August close, 95, or we need to update this graph to have like the most recent closes, but 96 to 97% accurate in booking transactions because of that layer cake. And when we run all of this against all of the other models out there who are trained on general accounting knowledge, you see that there's basically a plateau right around 70%. And even GPT-5, which, tens of billions of dollars have been spent on training GPT-5, is the first model to just get 1% better to get over that 70% threshold. So that's where we ultimately are looking to drive innovation and application of AI directly into the workflows of accounting, and excited to kind of like chat through what that looks like in practice. I'll pause there. I didn't know if folks had questions, or Michelle, if there's anything you wanted me to kind of like double tap on before I kind of like dive into the product itself, chat through things more in practice through like accounting workflows.
No, I think this is lovely. The thought theory, I think it's really going to stick once you kind of show how it works.
Definitely.
But if anybody else has any questions, we'll give you a minute to throw them in the chat.
Awesome. As folks are potentially throwing those in the chat, I'll get set up on the demo side here.
Yep. And I would just say, Rob, I love this conversation that you're having. So thank you for coming to our community. And where we get to is, when we bring vendors in from a spotlight perspective, it's, trying to change how vendors are selling to firms, because we're inundated, right? It's overwhelming. It's just like coming at us from all angles. So what does that look like? And really, how are you different? And really getting just like kind of like straight to the point of how it's different and why would we consider it such?
Absolutely. And I mean, just to that point really quickly to kind of like riff on that, Christine, is like, I feel for accountants right now because you are inundated, but there's also a lot of like mud being thrown into the water as well around like what is AI and what isn't. You can almost think about it as this difference between like something that's autonomous versus something that's actual AI. So like the easiest articulation of that is like something I kind of touched on, which is if you have these legacy systems who maybe use something like rules to help automate things in some way. Those have existed for a really long time. But what's happening is their companies are like, cool, we can use marketing and like call this AI now. When really it's like, sure, there might be some like, they might use some machine learning practice somewhere in there, but like really that's just like automation. It's not leveraging an actual like full architecture to use AI in the right way, which makes it really hard to discern from the accounting firm perspective, like what's real and what's not. And so obviously, like I'll certainly do my best here. If people have questions, I'm happy to kind of like talk through what those differences look like and all the above. But I certainly am sympathetic, I guess, to some extent on like having to navigate that, because it is a little bit of a challenging time with companies popping up all over the place saying like we automate this, we automate that, etc.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love, yeah, let's dive into your product because I just, also too, when it comes to AI, it's really how is this, the messaging of and really kind of where you're coming from as a product is upskilling and
Yeah,
not, and not replacing because it is a real fear out there. So
absolutely. Well, let's dive into that because, like, our intent here is to very much partner with the profession and make sure that, we're of the, broad mindset that, like, trust is a fundamental aspect of accounting. And being able to maintain that requires a human in the loop to make sure that you're double checking that work and that operators have the confidence that there is a professional on the other side who's kind of like looked at these things. And so that's how we want to make sure we're layering in this technology in a way that takes advantage of that and like empowers the professional who's working with these business owners. So as an accounting firm, and obviously again, as people have questions, or Michelle, Christine, Deneen, let me know as I go through this if there's particular things you want me to double click on or whatever it may be. I'll move fairly quickly through all of this, so please stop me if there's something we want to talk a little bit more about. But as we go into digits, if you were to log in as a firm, every firm comes in and basically joins our partner program. And by joining our partner program, you gain access to this dashboard of each of your clients. So each client will show up as a card here. And so if you have 10 clients, you'll have 10 cards that you can dive into, and we'll build more filtering and mechanisms into this to let you know, like, if there's things you need to review and how close to done is the close process, all the above. But the thing to note here is that every firm that comes in, we give you free demo data that you can launch on your own. So you don't necessarily have to link a client in order to check it, but you have this demo data you can play with. We also, as a part of the partner program, you can link your firm for free. I'm just calling this out that we do also have our Digits Academy here that you can come into, and you can do trainings on how to use Digits. It's run by Megan, who is a career CPA and built all of our kind of like training on top of Digits. But then when you dive in, you're going to land in a much more consumer design grade forward kind of like process here, or design UI here. So this is a dashboard that you yourself would land on as an accounting firm, but also when you invite your client, this is also where they would land. Now, the nice thing is that all of this is fully editable. And so if I go in here and maybe this client is profitable, I can take out Live Runway. And maybe I know that they care about a specific vendor or category. I can search for travel and be able to drag and drop these things in and start to tell or articulate a story that maybe it's like Uber goes along with travel. But you can start to customize these views, customize how both you look at a business, but also how your client may look at a business when they log in. And this leans into part of what we've seen is not only do accountants enjoy the efficiency tools I'll walk you through, but business owners very frequently are like, this is actually what I've always been looking for, is something that I can navigate without fear of messing something up, that's more visual in nature, that allows me to dive into these things and really understand what's going on within my business. And I'll talk more about some of that as we go here. But as an accounting firm, where this will all start is you'll link your connections through your API. So in this case, in my demo data, I have my Gusto connected, Ramp, Mercury, and Stripe are all things that we have connected here. We do have over 12,000 banks. We connect with folks like Bill and others, and this is an expanding set of companies that we actively have connections to bring in the data. So what that looks like is when you bring in the data, and this is something that I think Michelle and Christine, you had mentioned, is when this data comes in, there actually isn't a rule in sight anywhere. As data flows into Digits, we just automatically book it based on the history. And I mentioned earlier, if we've seen a history within a specific transaction or a vendor, then we're going to be effectively perfect being able to book that. And that will come in. And what will happen is as the transactions come in, if something falls through that layer cake, it will get surfaced to you through this inbox and will actively tell you like, hey, we need help on this transaction because we don't really know what's going on with this one. And so we'll look at this one as an example where we're coming in here and basically saying like, we think this might be taxes, but we've also seen similar transactions be booked as legal. We've also seen folks book this as intangible amortization in some ways. So you can actually live build your chart of accounts as you see net new things with new clients as well. But in this case, I'm going to book this as legal and hit save. You can also dive into the individual transaction as well, and it'll show you here if you've seen other similar transactions in the past. And in this case, we haven't. And so I'm going to go back and I'm going to hit save this as legal. And one thing that's pretty cool is it will then say, hey, we found 2 similar transactions in the past that would you also like to change these to make it consistent? In this case, I'm going to update this, and then it updates those transactions automatically for you. And so this will happen on an ongoing basis. And you can think about this as like training the company model for this company. So those first 3 months, you might have more inbox items as we gain confidence and understand what might be happening within any individual business. And as you do that, every month there's going to be less and less for you to review and get flagged on your behalf. Now, let's say that something comes in. I'm going to go back a couple months. Here we go. Let's say this Calm membership comes in. I'm going to go in and view this, and I see that this has come in a couple different times before, and I don't really know exactly like what to do here. I can easily tag my client here and just say like @client, what is this? And this will then send a message to that client's inbox as a comment, and they will get an email that they can click into and answer your question. If you need a receipt, they can upload a receipt. It'll append it to the transaction. And so and again, this is going to say like, hey, we think this might also be business applications and software or consultants and contractors. We're not really sure. I'm going to call this memberships and dues. And then you'll see it kind of like thinks, and then it books that transaction. So that's kind of like that general flow. But what's really neat about this is that's kind of like automation on the transaction side. You notice I'm not having to go in and edit rules. I'm not needing to, that's the AI in action. Every action we take, we are learning instantly within our product and then training that company model to be more accurate the next time it sees it. It's not saying like, oh, we saw this time. Can you update this rule and then like make it capture this appropriately? And this is where I think you'll see differences between legacy players who are trying to build out these AI systems and why they might not be as accurate or reliable as others might, is because they're trying to bolt on these other systems onto these like legacy architectures. Whereas we have kind of like a mapping of all these flows within the company and the firm that allow us to have confidence thresholds that drive the correct action within this. And what we've seen that's very, very cool is, sure, this is great on an ongoing basis. It reduces that work so that you can kind of like lean into upskilling labor, focusing on more advisory. But this also helps with like expanding net new types of business models where you might have a company come to you and they're like, we have a cleanup that is like a giant dumpster fire. And typically I would have to charge way too much money, or I would just turn it away. And what we've found is that Digits works incredibly well for those cleanup or like one-time annual like tax use cases where you can come in and just upload a bunch of bank transactions. I'm going to go ahead and just do this now. I'm going to make a new ramp. We'll make this here. I'm going to call it a bank account for the sake of simplicity of me finding it later. But how ultimately a lot of this works is I can just drag in this bank statement. I'm going to hit next. It's going to auto extract like all the right information here on column headers and just hit import. And what this is going to do is it's importing 101 transactions. And if I go to May, you'll see everything's italicized because we're actively trying to kind of like hydrate and bring all this information. We'll come back to this in a minute to see how it would work, but how all this ultimately will work is you can bring in all the transactions if you have the CSVs over the course of like years, or you can just come in and connect someone, start fresh, and some banks bring in up to 2 years worth of data. You can have the AI take a first stab at almost everything, and then it books it all and flags anything that it doesn't have confidence in into the inbox. And a lot of ways we've seen this happen It's like, okay, I actually have a bunch of documents. Now, I don't have this in the demo exactly, but we have kind of a documents repository that anytime a receipt is brought in through, like you need it for a transaction, or if you need a bank statement or whatever, the client can bring that in and send it to you, and it just ends up in here. Now, if they send a bank statement, a bunch of banks actually allow us to get those statements via API. And so in a world where that's possible, you'll see something like a Mercury bank statement come in. And what'll happen is we will just automatically do the reconciliation for you for that month. And so in this case, I'm actually just going to click into May because that bank statement was automatically pulled in from Mercury. And boom, I see a reconciliation. And what's really cool about this is we're using what's called a layout aware language model to interpret this bank statement. And we actually have individual bounding boxes around each transaction. You can see it navigating within, if you look closely. I don't know how it translates over Zoom. And I realize I'm pointing at my screen and then no one knows what I'm pointing at. So I talk with my hands. I apologize. But in that world, you see that kind of like navigating here. And I'll show you what a broken one of these looks like. But in this world where you're doing a cleanup or it's like an ongoing, we're taking away that work that you're needing to go like log into a bank account, download the bank statement. And not every bank does this. And I realize a lot of people work with small credit unions that don't have like the tech stack that allows these things to get sent. This will be a labor of love from Digit's standpoint to make sure that more of these banks work with us. But in the cases that they do, like Mercury, we'll just automatically bring in that bank statement and do the reconciliation for you, which is pretty cool. Now, in this world, I'm actually going to go delete out this bank statement. Oops. I'm going to go delete this file, and then I'm going to go back to my reconciliation. And I'm going to delete this reconciliation as well. And I'm going to upload a different statement to show you what kind of like a broken reconciliation would look like. And so in here, I'm going to go, let me find my file. So I can drag a statement in. So if I have a group of statements or an individual one, I can either drop it anywhere on the screen and we'll actually interpret that statement and then do the reconciliation for the correct month. But it's just easier. It'll be quicker if I just drag it directly on, but we can do that interpretation if needed. So I'm just going to drag this here and that auto reconciliation is going to start. I'm going to come back to this. It can take a couple minutes to do the reconciliation. And while we do that, I'm going to check in on the data I uploaded from before and just see, and boom, I just did a refresh, but all of that, not only the vendors populated from that data that I uploaded, but we also got the logos and we booked everything. And just on a quick look, everything looks like it's relatively accurate on what I uploaded of those 100 transactions. So you can imagine a world where you have hundreds of transactions over the course of years, whether they're being extracted from a document, because all the statements within Digits, you can't actually just this is still processing, so I can't do it right now, but you can extract it as a CSV and upload it. But ultimately, you can bring all that stuff in and the AI will take a first pass at that information and allow you to kind of take a look from there. So that's kind of like a live look at how these things work, whether you're bringing in net new data or it's from a bank connection or otherwise. Let's check in on this reconciliation. One of the cool things, this does run in the background. So you can go drag a bunch of things in, navigate, do other things, and this reconciliation is still going. So we'll come back to it. But ultimately what we're looking to do here is all of these more tedious tasks where in a world where today everything kind of, you bring all these things in and they get put into a feed that you then need to review, all that tedious work goes away. And a lot of what I've talked to firms about recently, especially as we're all familiar with I don't know if I've been able to find the talent to do the right work at this more tedious level work. So now I have CPAs who are trained to do advisory work for clients doing the bookkeeping, and that should, no one's excited about that. Not to say that clearing a reconciliation doesn't have a sense of dopamine to it. I'm not saying that there isn't excitement in that, but at the same time, how do we take these types of things off the plate? So I'm going to show a couple things here that will show up in a non-happy path of a reconciliation where, again, let's say that this came in, we're taking a look at it. What's really cool, and these will get flagged into your inbox as well, is we're hey, the AI did a bank statement and you can see AI agent reviewed 100% of the transactions, but there's a difference of 13,000 that require your attention. So I'm okay, great. Let me take a look at this. And I see there's a flag and it's telling me proactively that there's a missing transaction. And so when I look, I can either hover here and it shows me, it's like this transaction does not exist in the ledger. And I'm like, all right, cool. I mean, I see it on the bank statement, so it needs to exist. I'm just going to hit create transaction, and it automatically creates that transaction for you and then clears the error, the flag. Similarly, one of the other major things that comes out is like there's a date mismatch. And so in this case, I see Gusto on 5/31 in my bank statement, but we don't see Gusto in this month because we see it on June 1st. Now, whether or not that's an API thing from the bank account or from Gusto or not, it's on the bank statement as 5/31. And so we proactively let you change that date right from the reconciliation. So we just say, hey, change this date for the reconciliation. It changes it, and then everything's cleared. Now, the other thing it'll flag is if we have a transaction for a month that doesn't exist in the bank statement. And so in this case, there's $79 here that doesn't exist in the bank statement. So it's probably in like a pending state or whatever with the bank. So we can still finalize. And then what will happen is this will then show up on next month's reconciliation. So it'll carry through and you can still finalize your reconciliation for this month. So high level, there's this kind of like, at least from the transaction booking perspective, you come in and link your bank accounts and credit cards. We'll automatically book all the transactions for you. We'll flag the lower confidence ones into the inbox that I showed you, but then we'll also have AI do the reconciliation itself as well. Now, some of that might be manual that you might need to drag and drop the statement in. But in the case that those automatically get pulled in, we will then do the reconciliation automatically for you too. So when you and your team jump in, it's like, great, everything's been booked and the reconciliation has been done and it's flagged everything that I need to pay attention to. And so that transaction booking process just takes away so much of the tedium of what's going on within like an ongoing bookkeeping and accounting process. I realized that I just spoke a lot about a ton of different features and that are like a strong deviation from how folks do it today. I'll pause really quickly. I don't know if Michelle, Christine, or anyone in the audience have questions about anything I just talked about before I get into more like review tools and displaying of the financial reports and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so a couple things I want to point out that I like about this, which is a lot of the AI automation that I've seen out here actually throws it into a review process. So yes, you saved time by me not having to code it, but now I've got to jump in and say, I agree with all of this, right? So that time that I gained on the coding side, I just lost in the review process.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like that it's coming in, it's only flagging the things I need to look at, one. Two, I think this does a good job of solving for our smaller clients that may not have enough staff to create internal controls, right? So if we let the AI actually do the coding process, maybe you've got Susie, who's the office manager that does everything. This is a great way to create some of those internal controls. You're letting the AI do the coding, the reconciliation, and then we're in the back end just doing that approval process. And the client isn't actually interacting in this system. So just on those two fronts, I think that's where we get good internal controls here for our smaller clients, and we also are creating actually that capacity because we're not just trading one process for another.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That was extremely well said, Michelle, and is a lot of how we've looked to partner with firms as we've built this out to make sure that we're building it in a way that actually does allow for that time to upskill and bring those folks into a world where they actually can do, because I think saying like you get more time for advisory is something that like everyone's kind of started to say. It's very similar to like we have AI. But to your point, Michelle, is like a lot of the ways these things are implemented, it's like they don't actually save that time and you still have to do the review. And so we wanted to structure this in a way that like the work is actually getting done and it is shifting that role into being more the reviewer of the work. It's very similar the way we've kind of like, what's interesting is like accounting isn't the only profession that is like making this shift. So if you think about like a lot of these new like coding agents, I don't know how familiar people are on the engineering side with some of these, but like Claude Code or any of those, like software engineers are actually need to make a very similar transition where they're basically moving from being the like creator of software to being the orchestrator of these coding agents that they then supervise to create the software. And so then they become kind of like a conductor, if you will, in that world. And so every profession is seeing different variations of this. And so that's where this kind of like shift into like, how do we then upskill folks to be like, okay, here's the reviews that you need to go through. The quality control checks probably are not that dissimilar to what you'd always do, but like double checking that work, making sure that kind of like you're training that company and your firm model appropriately. And then all this work slowly gets to more and more automated, and you can spend that time, you know, with your client. And one of the nice things, this is actually a really nice bridge, Michelle. So thank you for asking that question, into like, we don't want to only focus on one side of this. If we're saying like, hey, spend more time on like reviewing these things with your client and being an advisor, we also want to up level your ability there as well. And so I'll start to get into some of those pieces and what that ultimately looks like. You can see a nugget of some of that here, where if I flip through any of these months, we're actually automatically doing like a brute force statistical analysis across every transaction, every customer, every vendor, and highlighting the high level changes in any given month or specific time frame around the revenue or the expenses. And these start to give nuggets, especially, Michelle, you mentioned like lower level clients who maybe are not paying like for advisory. You could start to like sprinkle in some nuggets for them of like, hey, I just did some light level thinking here. Like, here's some biggest changes in your operational expenses or your revenue. If you want us to dive more into this, like we can set up a more advisory level kind of a relationship. I've seen a lot of firms able to kind of like provide sprinkles of what their higher level services are to their smaller clients who maybe traditionally can't afford it, because we're doing a lot of that variance or flux analysis for you. And so what that starts to look like is, okay, we've got all the transactions in, we've done our reconciliations, and now we have some of those reviews we need to go through. And so this is where we have built this financial tab, which is intended to very much be for the accountant to kind of like quickly run through everything and see. You can see how quickly we can pull in 3 months, 6 months, all the above. We can change, like if we want a year-to-date column, deltas, totals, monthly deltas, all the above. And we can kind of like see this in different views. But what's really cool about this is it allows you to hover and go through. So let's say I go down to like business applications and software, and I can see for this most recent month, this actually might be my fault because I had uploaded, let me click into this. I had uploaded all of these transactions in May. So this is like skewing my thing here, but it'll show like, hey, in June, you spent much less with any of these individual vendors. And that allows me to click in and basically like, well, what's going on with this? And if I needed to change something or move something around or see if there's an abnormality, it's telling me a bunch of those. But I can also kind of like dive into the details of what's ultimately going on. So you kind of like have this state where you can see like, did my clearing account actually clear, or what's going on with any of this through this review. But you can also then click into your vendors and start to look at some of those high level things, like were there any new vendors in any given month? And did those get booked correctly? So like Render, I can click into this and basically like, well, what is Render? It's a cloud developer unified platform. Okay, great. So it probably is business applications and software. That's correct. Like, cool. Swift courier services. Like, what is this? The courier monthly document delivery. It's like other professional fees. That seems reasonable. And then we can also start to look into folks that have multiple categories. But the cool thing about where it's like Gusto makes sense, it's payroll. But like Apple, it's like, okay, well, let's look at Apple. Let's click into this. How else has Apple been booked kind of like over time as a vendor? And I can see like, okay, business applications and software, computer expenses. Okay, a bunch of these make sense because probably the difference between buying a computer and buying like an application on Apple. So like that seems reasonable. But what's pretty cool about this is you can also just do this for the entire year and say like, all right, well, let me just review this in totality here. And what's really neat, and this is mostly for like a cleanup purpose, but let's say that for some reason I wanted to rebook every single Apple transaction, I can just bulk change all of those transactions to whatever I want them. So if I wanted all of these to be computer expense, I can just change all of them to computer expense and apply it to all 18 right in one place. And then it actually moves it out of the multiple categories like area of what I was doing because everything got booked the exact same. Same with Calm, where it's like, hey, there's this one that is memberships induced. This might actually be the one that I did earlier today. But I'm going to put this as business applications and software and apply that. So this gives you some like additional ways to review or look at all your vendors throughout the year, double check if everything has been booked as appropriately or as you'd like it to, and go from there. So this is where it's like with any AI tool that you're assessing, you want them to have that kind of like understand. You want to understand like, where is my data going? Where is it being sent? Are you building these things proprietarily? Like what's going on? What's the auditability of these things? Because honestly, like the less the data or the more the data goes externally, the less auditability you have and what's going on. And so that's where within Digits, not only is the initial booking, like all these things are done within our own models or training, but we're also giving you the review checks to double check that work as well, enabling the review to happen in the right way. And this is going to continue to evolve, and we'll add more and more checks throughout our process, especially as we introduce things like department level tracking, where you might want to know like, hey, what transactions have come in that like don't have a department book to it. And so as we have like departments and locations and projects, these other things built into the software, all of that will kind of like allow you to kind of like double check that work. But one of the nice things, just calling out on departments, is the other thing we're doing across all this is all these pieces flow together. Because you can tell, like if I uploaded that document into my reconciliation, that document showed up in my documents here. If I upload a document in here, it'll actually read it and say like, cool, this is a bank statement. I'm going to go do the reconciliation automatically. So all these things kind of flow together in a very similar way that if your client uses Gusto and they also use departments for their employee level tracking, we'll just automatically book the journal entry for all of those departments and different employees for you based on what you have set up in Gusto. And so we want to take a lot of that manual work off of your plate and make sure that those things flow through together. Again,
Rob, we've got a quick question in here, which I think you were going to touch on anyway, but it's, does the software handle non-banking transactions such as depreciation or overhead allocations or month-end journal entries?
Love that. So there's probably a couple different pieces in there. So like short answer is yes for some more immediately, and then in very soon in the future for others. So I'll start with the schedules. So in like literally, I'm pretty sure there's a product meeting happening right now that I'm missing to be here, which I'm excited about, but is talking about how do we automate schedules. We're going to start with fixed assets and prepaids, but that will get into then like loan schedules and rent schedules and things along those lines in different amortization work papers. But what that'll look like is if we see a transaction come into the ledger that looks like it might be a fixed asset, what'll happen is it'll get flagged into your inbox and say like, hey, we think this is a fixed asset. What do you want to do with this? Do you want us to maintain the schedule for this for you? It'll ask some follow-on questions and then just maintain the schedule for you. In a very similar way that reconciliations just automatically get done, it's going to flag the things that you need to pay attention to. We'll do the same for your schedules. And so in that world, that all kind of like will flow together. The schedules don't exist in the product yet today, but they are it's going to be roughly like in Q1 is probably when we're thinking about like launch dates around a couple of those things. But that's one piece. So the other piece of this is just like general booking journal entries. At any given time, you can go create a new transaction and create a journal entry with your memos and pay in, pay out, all the above on kind of like what might be happening there, add line items, whatever you need to do. So you can still like do manual booking. And that comes into place a lot of times if let's say you're like e-commerce. We haven't built like inventory integrations quite yet. So if you work with an e-commerce client and they're using like Katana for their inventory, you might need to go like journal at the end of every month, the kind of like ending balances out of Katana into Digits. So all that is possible. And eventually we will automate a bunch of those things, very similar to how we've automated Gusto as it relates to all that. So I'll pause there. Michelle, did I answer all the pieces of that question? Let me know if I didn't, and I can certainly speak to it.
No, I think the big answer there is coming soon, right?
Awesome. Okay. And that's also how we've like done historically and want to keep doing is partnering with the accounting firms to make sure that we're building out the right things. We're obviously starting with fixed assets and like prepaid amortizations, but that'll expand in a bunch of other types of schedules as well. And being able to like read a contract, interpret it, like what is the schedule that's associated with this contract or lease agreement or whatever it may be. So those are all super exciting things that are coming down the pike in the fairly near term. Awesome. So the
All
last,
right. So,
oh,
oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say the
Let's
last bit to talk through is just like, okay, reporting to your clients. And Michelle, if there were other questions you want me to speak to before I dive into this, this is more just like reports display layer to your clients. So I can wait if there was other questions related.
go ahead.
Awesome. So from a reporting perspective, this kind of like gets into the other side of this. A lot of what we talk through is kind of like the efficiency of the accounting workflows and where AI really like layers into that. But the other part of this, and we touched on this at the very beginning, is like the other thing that a lot of this unlocks is like a differentiated client experience. And I think everyone on this call, no matter your type of client, you want your client experience to be differentiated. You want it to be impactful, because the more that it is and the more it's interactive and the more you're engaging with your client, the more they're going to drive you to do more advisory. And so what we've seen with the firms that we partner with is when they use Digits reports as the display layer, traditionally, I think like this is what we've seen. Obviously, like everyone on this call might have different kind of like feelings on the statistic I'm about to throw out there, but like broadly what we've seen is like a lot of clients roughly only open their like black and white, PDF report like 15% of the time, because they're like, look, I just need this in case my bank asks for it. Because a lot of the times the business owners aren't sophisticated enough to actually like interpret that statement. And so what Digits has done is when you use Digits as the reporting layer, I'm just going to run a quick report here. Actually, let me go back. I'm not going to do this for November. I'm going to do it for October just because it's a completed month. Is we will automatically populate for you as the accounting firm your high level revenue and expenses. Now you can edit this very similar that you could the dashboard and bring in the things that like you think your client might care about. Another cool thing is you can bring in things like a file drop zone, and you can say like, hey, I need you to add this bank statement, etc. Just drop it in the drop zone. And you can add like a little note. They drop it in the drop zone. It shows up in your documents. If it's a bank statement, we'll just automatically do the reconciliation once we have the bank statement, etc. But you can start to craft kind of like what they care about the most. And again, like if it's Apple, you could bring in Apple and drag and drop these things in and all the above. So it gives you this customization, but you can also do that customization directly to the P&Ls. So if you wanted to like show a trend line or bring in a monthly breakdown, for however many months, depending on what that client is ultimately looking for, you can kind of craft the P&L, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement all into kind of like a report package that you send. And the firms that we've seen that use this as their reporting layer, over 70% of the downstream clients actually open it. And the reason being is that all of that interactivity is available for the client as well. So if they look into business applications and software and they're like, what's going on here? They can then dive in and explore themselves without the fear of like, oh, I'm going to mess this up. I just need to figure out like what happened in May that drove this change. Because we all know when we get on with the client, they're going to ask about some month that is like unrelated to what we're planning on talking to them about. And they're like, what happened in May? And you're like, I don't know. I need to go back and like, I'll get back to you. In this case, you can just dive through those things live with the client and talk through like, okay, for this month, you had like a pretty large increase with this like code craft solutions, and then they're like, oh yeah, I remember I paid this contractor. And it instantly kind of like takes away that question. But the other cool thing is all of this is commentable. You could think of our reports as like a Google Doc. So you can leave a bunch of commentary and different things within this. So when you send it to your client, it has your context and thoughts and all the above kind of like immediately layered in. And so just really kind of like, not only do we want to give you that efficiency to unlock the ability to kind of like upscale into advisory, we do want to give you the tools to achieve advisory in the right way at the same time. And so that's where all of this starts to flow together in kind of like a singular experience that you can come in and use with your firm to make your team more efficient, but at the same time, you can use with your client to make your client downstream experience that much more fruitful and one that is like sticky for them. So that was a lot. And then I haven't even touched on like we have built-in bill pay and invoicing, but I realize we're almost at time, so I can obviously talk about that if it makes sense or is interesting. But I'll pause there in case anybody has questions or other things, Michelle, Deneen, or Christine, that you think I should touch on.
Yep, so we've got one more question. Can the software split transactions from the bank feed? For example, if the deposit is the net amount but takes out the merchant fees or discounts.
Yes. Why am I clicking into that one? So yes, you can. I'm going to put this in edit view. Let me go to here. Let's just say that I need to do something with this. Oops. I'm going to click this guy, and where is it? Sorry, I need to remember where this setting is. I'm not actively doing the bookkeeping for folks on a regular basis, but you can split these out. I just don't remember exactly where the setting is to do that. I can follow up, but I do know that this is possible. I just don't, I might have moved where the setting got set to split it, but it is possible in the product. I'll follow up with my team, and then Michelle, I can send you either like a video on how to do it that you can share with the group, or otherwise to like fully answer that question.
Perfect. Well, I know we're getting close to time, so here's the big question, Rob, is cost. Like if you're telling me I could get rid of a transaction clerk, am I going to pay the equivalent of their salary to access this?
The good news is no, you are not. The way the Digits is structured is $100 per month per client. And all of the things that we just talked about are included in that cost. And so, you can think about like we were replacing QBO, but then we're also potentially replacing, we talked about some of the labor, but then there's the other part of it is like we are building directly in some of the tools that traditionally are like external tools that are required to like make QBO more efficient. A lot of that's getting built directly into the product as well. And one interesting thing just to note, I don't have a pricing page I can bring up to show you, but we do have partner specific SKUs like pricing plans as well that are not available for operators. And so we literally just launched these yesterday, which is why I don't have something I can like distinctly put in front of you. But what we launched was a low volume plan. So it's like maybe I have a client that has a holding company that holds like a bunch of other operational accounts. I don't want to pay $100 a month for like something that has less than 200 transactions a year. So we have this low volume plan that you can use for holding companies. That's $10 a month that you can just kind of like have to hold. And then we have what's called a ledger only plan, which is meant for those annual like more tax use cases where it's like I just need to come in and clean everything up so they can file taxes appropriately. And what that does is it deeply limits the client access, but gives you everything you need to do your work. And so the client will have access to commenting and like documents so that you can say like, hey, what is this? I need clarification, and they can answer you, but they can't come in and see reports and all the other like things that are available for them. And that's $25 a month. And so we do have these partner SKUs that kind of like unlock your ability to do a bit more in the cases where like the client really isn't as involved, and you just need to be able to do the work for kind of like that annual set of things too.
So I'd say two pieces on that, Rob. Number one is, so you have pricing where you can take your product, attach it to an existing QBO for a lot of that AI and reporting, but then you also, but it's not as enhanced unless you come in with the full Digits like package. Is that correct? Am I saying that wrong?
Let me like clarify quickly. Is like technically we do have an ability to do like a reporting only layer on top of QuickBooks because we have built kind of like a full integration through API. The use case for that though is not for like ongoing kind of like reporting usage. The use case for that is like, hey, I have a client that like doesn't know who Digits is and I need to help convince them. So you can put them on this reporting package on top of QuickBooks and be like, look, this is great. And then it's like a one-click transfer over to the ledger, and you just link their kind of like real-time accounts from there, if that makes sense.
So perfect. Thank you. And then how is it to convert data and migrate data into your product?
It's straightforward, especially if you're coming from QuickBooks. And so in that world, we have built, I don't have the ability to show this to you, but we have built a full API integration into QuickBooks. So when you come in, you say, hey, this client's coming from QuickBooks, you'll choose the client. And then what you'll do is you'll set a cutover date. So let's say I finished all of the bookkeeping up until like the end of September. Then everything from September moving forward, or like November 1st moving forward, will come from the real-time bank connection or real-time credit card connection, and everything else would come from QuickBooks. And it's as easy as that. It pulls in the whole history and all the above. Now, I will say if you're coming from zero, we would love to work with you. While we do have, like we talked through, kind of ledger importing ability, like you can technically import like all your journal entries over an infinite amount of time. Like all of that importing exists, or even if you have bank statements from that amount of time, you can use that as your starting point. But if you have 5 years worth of data in Zero, Craig Walker, who again, founder and CTO of Zero, is our head of product strategy, where their API is less able to do what we've done for QuickBooks. And so we want to like work with firms who are looking to kind of like bring folks over to Zero from 2 digits to structure kind of like an importer that works for you. So obviously, like raise your hand if you're interested in that. We're happy to kind of like work together directly with our product team to make sure that that, you know, comes over in the right way.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Another question here, can the software create consolidated reports across multiple clients?
Love it. So not today, but it's on our roadmap for 2026. So I can't speak to specific timelines, but 2026 is probably going to look a lot like consolidations, maybe like foreign currency handling, things like that, as we, you know, finish building out a lot of the schedules and automated reconciliations and all the above on that front. We do allow for all of the exporting you might need to do a consolidation elsewhere. And then the other thing I haven't talked about, and unfortunately I don't have it in my demo account to show you, but we did recently launch a full API. And so if you use external tools to do consolidations, like you might use Fathom or something like that for consolidations, we don't have an integration of Fathom today, but we do have an open API. So we're, you know, they can come build to it, or you can extract data through export or through the API to do those consolidations elsewhere, depending on the tool set you use to accomplish that today.
All right, we're down to our last minute. Any other questions? All right, well, thanks everybody for jumping on. Rob, thanks for jumping on and doing this. This was great. And
Absolutely.
if folks are interested, how do they get a hold of Digits?
I meant to talk about that. That's a great question. So if you wanted to work together, you can obviously email me directly. I'm perfect. I'm just rob@digits.com. So like fairly easy to get a hold of. But what you can do is if you go to digits.com, and then under accountants, you go to become a partner. This is kind of like the flow to get access to everything we just talked about. So you click on become a partner, you'll fill out a little bit of your email address. It'll offer a call so you can chat with our team and talk with them a little bit more about what you might be looking for and all the above. But you can also just get into the product directly from there as well and start kind of like building out kind of like what you want to use and all the above from there. So happy to work with you, depending, no matter where you are in your journey of wanting to adopt, starting a new firm or a new CAS practice, or trying to like evolve your current CAS practice into kind of like a more AI native practice as well. So
And to just try it out, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just try it out. But yeah, and I love this. So like Rob, thank you for coming. Again, to our Infinite Ties community, we're committed to bringing, you know, what's new in this industry, and so we appreciate that. We're vendor agnostic, and we bring the best to the community. And so we've heard a lot of great things about Digits and are excited for what you're building in your journey.
Absolutely. Well, I genuinely appreciate all of our conversations we've had even leading up to this, but being able to come and talk to the community has really been a delight as well. So obviously let me know if I can ever be helpful, or if anyone has any other questions, happy to help speak to those in the right way too. So thank you very much for inviting me. And it's, you know, really great to see folks like Infinite Ties that are working on helping business owners navigate or firms navigate all of these changes and shifts that are going on right now, because it's a lot to figure out. So it
Yeah.
takes folks like you to help that. So I genuinely appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Rob.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Rob.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.